From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget about the Junior. The JR at the end of the name is very, very important. Also very important before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button to get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And today, it is Wednesday. A lot of things moving and shuffling around. That's just the way it goes in the NFL when it comes to cut week in the NFL. But nonetheless, the Saints' initial 53-man roster dropped on Tuesday. If you were following us all day, you saw the names, and by now you've seen the names if you didn't follow us. And there's more things kind of sprinkling in, happening now, as it usually does around this time. So it's a very fluid situation. So without further ado, we're going to get into the big picture, which is exactly that. Our observations from the Saints' first 53.
Exactly. And in that roster release and the release of the names who got cut, there were a few surprises in there. And that's my first question to you, Sean, is in seeing who the Saints kept and seeing who they got rid of. We've already seen a few players named to the practice squad so far today. There'll be more to come. But so far, really in the last 24 hours or so, what have been the biggest surprise moves that the Saints have made?
Well, I don't know the biggest surprise when it happened. And if you looked at my Twitter/X feed, and I tweeted about it, was Jonathan Abram getting cut. Just thought he was going to make the initial roster. He has since been brought back to the practice squad. So he is a member of the Saints organization as we speak. But when that happened, Tyrann Mathieu tweeted, had me a broken heart emoji. So clearly that was something that was surprising because I actually thought not only should he have made the team, but I thought he was the best player next to Tyrann Mathieu throughout camp. And look, it still may be a situation where he's practice squad, standard elevation, and he gets to play week in and week out. Sometimes there's some roster manipulation. So that was probably the biggest thing. I wouldn't necessarily characterize anything else as a huge surprise. Maybe a mild surprise was Mason Tipton, just considering the fact that we didn't see a whole lot from him after the first 2 weeks. But those first 2 weeks were good. Now, the surprising thing, or maybe some more, when you kind of let it all settle in and really you kind of look at the cumulative impact of the roster, the big thing that jumps out to me is they got younger. They got younger. 10 rookies, 4 undrafted free agents, and 6 draft picks. Their 7th draft pick is back on the practice squad. And then not just that, there are 10 second-year players on the initial 53. And there are only 8, I believe, significant players over the age of 30 or 30 and over that they are counting on this season. Last year, there was 11. So not a total drastic unplug everything and just start over, but they definitely did get a little bit younger. 4 undrafted rookies made the team. Some would say that's a surprise. Again, the only one that really surprised me was Tipton. Peyton making the team did not. I know that was your guy. Yeah. Peyton making the team, Rico Peyton, did not surprise me. I was just curious if the numbers were going to shake out. Would they? And they did for Rico Peyton. Every time he was on the field, he got that opportunity. He did so. The other thing that I got wrong on my 53, but I even said in my explanation, don't be surprised if the opposite is true. That's the punter. I thought Blake Grupe clearly won the kicker battle, and I think that had really settled itself probably even before the last preseason game. But the 54-yarder, I think, secured his fate. Exact opposite was the case in the punter battle. If you've watched this podcast over training camp and read the 5 takes, early on, Headley, this was not a competition. Headley was that far ahead. He was killing Hayball. Hayball had trouble adjusting. He was having trouble angling his kicks towards the pylon. And about midway through camp into that first preseason game, you started to see a little bit of a shift to where it all flipped. And all of a sudden, Hayball was the one booming it. Hayball was the one angling the punts. And it was Headley who struggled with consistency. And I still think that last punt he had, the short field that he set up for Tennessee's game-winning touchdown, sealed his fate. And that's just the way it goes. And he's a little bit younger and was Hayball's younger and had been a bit more consistent. So he won that battle. And then the other thing is simply this. You look at the way it stacks up at different positions, more help is coming. Yeah. More help is coming. Even it may not all come today from another team, but it is coming at some point between now and the first game. That is a guarantee it is going to happen.
Definitely. And I'm pretty much with you on the surprises. I didn't expect Jonathan Abram to get released like that. I thought he would be in competition with Jordan Howden to maybe be that safety opposite of Tyrann Mathieu. Lou Hedley was a pretty big surprise for me because we weren't in California with y'all, so we could only see the footage y'all sent back, but the Saints don't let you shoot special teams. So we didn't get to see a lot of the special teams battle. I thought Hedley would kind of win the job by default, so to see Hayball get it was a surprise. So it'll be another young punter for the Saints. You know, they had Thomas Morstead for so long, and he was so great and so consistent for this team. And then it was Blake Gilligan, and then it was Lou Hedley, and now you got Matthew
Four in a
Hayball.
row, right? It's four guys in a row, right?
4 seasons, 4 punters. So hopefully this Australian punter sticks with Matthew Hayball. He's got a big leg for sure. And the growth that you say he's had just in the last 2 or 3 weeks alone, if he can continue to grow like that throughout the season, hopefully the Saints won't be relying on him too much. But if they do, hopefully he can put the defense in some good positions. Mason Tipton was also a surprise for me just because I know he was the star of training camp, but we didn't see him in any preseason game.
Yeah.
He didn't have a single catch in the preseason, and that goes to show you, and we'll touch on this later, how important practice is, because Mason Tipton made the roster over some guys who, you know, made plays in the preseason just off of how impressive he was in practice. I think another, I don't want to say surprise, but it was good to see this guy help himself, and that was Peyton Turner making the roster, because heading into training camp, I wasn't sure if all of those pass rushers were going to make it, the pass rushers we were talking about. And the ones who might have been the odd man out was either going to be Peyton Turner or Isaiah Foskey in my mind. Foskey a little younger, just being a second-round draft pick last year. I figured he would probably survive, but Peyton Turner was kind of on the bubble as they headed to California. So for him to be on the roster still, that means he helped himself out. And you mentioned bringing in more help. Right now, they only have 8 offensive linemen on the roster right now. So they're going to have to add some depth to what right now is their weakest unit.
Yeah, and I'm gonna stay on the social media feed to see what happens with that, because we saw Hergel come back to the practice squad. We got that confirmed. We saw Ezram come back to the practice squad. We got that confirmed. I think there was another one. And again, I'm gonna check Twitter throughout the pod, just because this is, like I said, it's very fluid. So by the time you're watching this, something may end up being dated, but nonetheless, we got to go with the information that we have available right now. You said 8 offensive linemen, 6 wide receivers, but they rarely dress even 5 wide receivers on game day. If they do, someone is a special teamer. They also added off waivers the Minnesota running back. What is his name again?
Kenny Nwangwu,
who is a kick returner specialist. But according to reports out of Minnesota, he was a surprise cut because he had a good camp. Clearly, we said the running back position was an area they would target, and ended up being an area that they targeted. So we'll see what happens there. Was he an active roster guy or a practice squad guy? I have to clarify that. But nonetheless, he's coming to the organization at some point.
Right. And Rashid Shaheed, by the way, doing kick returns for the majority of last season. Rashid Shaheed kind of banged up right now. So having somebody else who could step into that role early season is pretty big.
Yeah. A couple other things. Sal DeVere not on IR. Kendre Miller is. The Kendre Miller IR thing is probably saving him right now, because he, as the games went on and the practices went on, and this guy got hurt in warm-up to the first practice, and he's still not available still, and he's going to miss the first 4 games or whatever it is now. It just does not look good, and DA's been so specific with him in terms of his frustration in getting him back on the field. You just got to wonder, is he doing enough, or is there anything else he could be doing? Because, there have been other guys that have had similar injuries that have come back, that were injured way after him, that have come back way before him. Yeah. So that's certainly something to monitor going forward. I know the organization is frustrated with him. Hopefully he can get on the field. Hopefully light bulb goes on for him or something, because you almost get that perception too. It's not just that he's injured, it's that he doesn't quite get it, like from a professional standpoint, what he has to do to get on the field.
Exactly. And Saints fans, they're not going to like that, because there's always, and we've seen it in our final word questions. We've had a couple questions and people making the comments. The thing about Kendre Miller, when he was drafted, there was a local running back who went crazy at Tulane by the name of Tyjae Spears, who was just in the Dome the other day. He's playing pretty darn well for Tennessee right now, and the Saints could have drafted him. Some people expected the Saints to draft a local guy. Instead, they go Kendre Miller. Fast forward a year, Kendre Miller isn't even on the practice field right now, and Tyjae Spears is getting ready to be part of a 1-2 punch with Tony Pollard in Tennessee. So,
and not just that, I happened to bump into Tyjae's agent a couple days ago, maybe last week, and not just that, like he's kind of like their guy from a marketing standpoint too. Tyjae, I mean, they're really building a lot around him. So he's not just a guy that's getting on the field; he's a guy that they've kind of making one of the faces of their franchise. And the guy that wasn't supposed to be injured has been injured ever since he got here, and that was Kendre Miller. So look, they want to get back. We all want to see him back because when he's on the field, he's actually pretty good. But we just haven't seen him on the field quite a bit. Right. So that's really where it's at with the roster. I didn't see that, whoa, he got cut type of moment that you've seen from some other places and from some other cut days that I've been around a lot of them now over the last 15 years. So that's just kind of where things stand, and away they go. And it's also important to note, we have this idea that when they cut a player, I have to remind myself of this, that, okay, they're available, so every other team's going to try to grab them now. I think coaches overthink that sometimes. Yeah. The initial waiver wire, no one got claimed by the Saints. No one got claimed. So, and then you think that and on the flip side, you think your team is going to just bring a bunch of people in. They brought in one. I think they're one of like 6 teams or something like that. They brought a player in, or notable teams that brought a notable player in. So that was one player. So there's going to be more moving and shaking, but I do think the anticipation of what's available sometimes doesn't always meet what actually happens. But I do think more moves are on the way and are coming, and I look for one up front on the offensive line. I just can't imagine them going into the regular season just like this, the offensive line.
I agree. Now, something else that came from yesterday, listening to Dennis Allen talk, he finally gave an update on the position battle you all have been waiting to hear from. That's that quarterback 2 battle between Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler. Dennis Allen talking about it yesterday, but it's not exactly the update that many of you wanted to hear. Basically, what he said is what we said. The battle is still happening. Long story short, who won the battle between Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler? Nobody did, Sean.
Well, we don't know yet. And we said like 4 times on this podcast and on shows, I said, they don't have to declare it. Literally the words out of his mouth were, I'm not going to make a declaration or anything on the QB2. So here's the deal. I understand it's the big splash thing because it's the last thing we all saw. It's the quarterback position. And some of y'all weren't happy with me with my last podcast about my thoughts on who might be ahead. But it is what it is. It all comes from what I see. And you're welcome to have different opinions. And obviously, it's not wrong because we don't know. But here's the deal. I'm getting the feeling that people are using this as a reason to, like, go off on DA again. Like I understand how much better would you feel if he just said who the QB2 battle is. Okay, that's fine. It may give you a little confirmation, but do we have to let me rephrase that. Like, they're making way too big a deal out of who is going to be number 2 on the depth chart. It certainly is a big deal, and if that ever came to the problem ever came up to where they had to turn to QB2, of course they would know who that player was when the time comes. But right now, it's still a legitimate competition. It was still very close. I thought one excelled in practice. I thought one outplayed the other in games. How do you weigh that? And maybe they just want to see a little more time with the ones, or not the ones, excuse me, but with the team they're actually going to be rolling with and with different reps. The challenge comes with who gets the reps, the second, third team reps, because in the regular season, you don't get a lot of reps back up in third-string quarterbacks because all the reps go to QB1, which brings me to my main point of all of this. I understand your excitement or your anticipation or your interest in this, but the truth of the matter is simply this. It is not at all the most pressing matter for the New Orleans Saints right now, figuring out who the backup quarterback is. It is important because you have to prepare in case your starting quarterback goes down, but it is not nowhere near the most pressing matter as they sit here today. I mean, you've got concerns up front of the offensive line. You've got concerns at the wide receiver position. You've got, a rookie punter, whatever the case may be, a tough start to the season. Those are more pressing matters than the actual QB2. Now, QB2 is very important, but QB2, like I just said, if it ever comes to that, they will then turn their attention to where that becomes the major part of what they have to deal with. But for right now, they're going to let those guys compete, take their time, see. We may never know throughout the entire season who actually won. Now, I don't know if they're going to dress 3 on game day, so that might be your cue or your clue as to who won the QB2 battle. But for right now, not the most pressing concern.
Definitely not, and we're here because neither of them particularly set themselves apart from the other one. Go back over the preseason stats. Jake Haener, 207 passing yards. Spencer Rattler, 202 passing yards. Jake Haener, 56% completion rate. Spencer Rattler, 53%. Spencer Rattler did have 2 touchdowns to Jake Haener's 0. Haener having one called back. But Spencer Rattler also got sacked more times, and since Spencer Rattler lost a fumble. Spencer Rattler, a little bit better in preseason games. Jake Haener, better in practices. And I know we read the comments. We read the comments, and we thank y'all for commenting, and we want y'all to continue to comment. And in reading the comments, a lot of people gave me the Allen Iverson speech, the practice. We talking about practice, but practice matters to Dennis Allen. If practice didn't matter to Dennis Allen, Mason Tipton would not be on his roster. Equanimous St. Brown caught a touchdown in week 3. Equanimous St. Brown played in all 3 preseason games and scored a touchdown. Mason Tipton did not make a single catch in any preseason game. Preseason EQ St. Brown is up here. Preseason Mason Tipton's down here. But Mason Tipton impressed in practice so much that on cut day, Equanimous St. Brown is out. Mason Tipton has a nice locker in that new Saints locker room that they just renovated in the Caesars Superdome. Practice matters to Dennis Allen. What he sees there translates to the depth chart, and that's why Jake Haener versus Spencer Rattler is still happening. And like you said, maybe we'll see throughout the season. Knock on wood. Hopefully nothing happens to Carr, and we don't have to see who that backup quarterback is. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But right now, Dennis Allen says he wants to see those guys continue to compete, and his job and the challenge for him and his staff is to find a way to continue to get both of those guys reps while Derek Carr is going to take the majority.
That's it. I mean, they got to develop. He said it plain as day. Those 2 guys still have to develop. We have to develop those guys. And he called it very unique and very challenging because exactly that. When you get into game week, all the niceties are over. It's who's playing, how do we win the game, and we got to practice as much as possible with the guys that are going to play to help us win this game. I remember when Drew was here. Drew never liked giving up reps. 95% of the reps went to Drew. I mean, that's what you're talking about. I mean, if it's on the low end, it's probably 90% of the reps. So they're going to have to work some things out to get these guys work and develop so they can, quote unquote, continue the competition, but also develop and get better because they're playing and they're practicing so much in the preseason and the training camp to where the drop-off comes while you're doing some scout looks and a couple of practices within the game, a couple of reps within the game plan. That's how do you stay hot? How do you stay, in the mix? So that's a challenge, but that's something I don't see, you don't see, y'all don't see, only the team sees. Yep. So our vision of that now goes away because we can't, we're not allowed to see the entirety of practice once the game's regular season starts. We're able to see a few minutes, but we got to get out there by after the stretching starts. So that's just where it stands. And I understand the interest because it's the last thing we saw, the most pressing thing we saw, the exciting thing we saw. I don't want to just dump on people that think Rattler's the guy because I think it's not a crazy thing to suggest.
Definitely not.
It's not. But now that everything's settled into normal routine, that now kind of falls back a little bit on the priority list just because now you're going to be game planning week in and week out.
Yeah, and like you said, exciting. That made the preseason so fun this year. How many people are locked into all 60 minutes of 3 preseason games? Most people turn it off after your starters go out. A lot of teams might watch the first half. They don't really care who's playing in the second half. But a lot of Saints fans were locked into every single minute because of the competition between Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler. Now, DA mentioned, he calls it show team. Some people call it scout team. Which guy will maybe stand out there? He mentioned some extra sessions outside of practice with some of the young receivers. Maybe they can set themselves apart there. But like you said, right now the focus shifts. Now that we know who the 53 that made the roster are, the practice squad is coming together, the focus shifts to week 1. And we know who will be on the field week 1, and that'll be Derek Carr versus Bryce Young in the Caesars Superdome, Saints versus Panthers, to hopefully get off to a winning record on the season because that first month of the season ain't no joke.
It is. It's not. It's not. It is no joke. Did I say that right? I don't know, but I agree with you. I'll just one last little kind of thing on the QB2 battle. Now that it's kind of settled, not settled, but we won't be able to watch more of it. I love how each guy didn't let the other one run away with it. Like every time someone had momentum, the other one struck back. I really like that. I mean, that's what you want. And if you talk to both these guys, that's in their DNA. Like you pick up on that. Like, oh no, I'm not letting you run away with this thing. And that's exactly what you want. And it kind of brought up the reps of everyone around them, both offense and defense. So it was a good competition. But that competition now moves behind closed doors, so we won't know until, like I said, maybe we get a clue on the game day inactives. If a certain quarterback is inactive and one is, clearly that quarterback would be the one to come in should something happen. Do we have any questions?
Especially, to add to what you said, especially Spencer Rattler, because going into that third preseason game, that was the fourth quarter for him. He was outplayed by Jake Haener in the preseason game too. Yeah. And the two of us both left that game thinking Jake Haener had a comfortable lead on the competition. And shout out to Spencer Rattler for buckling down and having an incredible game against the Titans. Had one of the best throws in the entire preseason, not just from the Saints, but from any quarterback. Spencer Rattler is the reason that this competition is continuing.
And we still have it, right? Season. We still have a competition here.
Yeah, because if he folded against Tennessee, there is no competition.
Right. Do we have any questions?
We did. We had one, and we kind of touched on it earlier. This one from George in Metairie. Were you surprised that the Saints decided to keep Kendre Miller and not Jacob Kibodi? Was it a mistake bringing Kendre back?
No, exactly what happened was what I thought was going to happen. Miller is still only a second-year guy. He's a third-round pick at a position that they invested in, obviously a fairly high-round pick in the third round. And as much as they're frustrated with his health or lack thereof, or lack of, call it professionalism when it comes to his health, he is still a young kid, and they still don't want to let a potentially highly graded guy they spent a lot of time and energy on to get into, obviously, the Saints building. They don't want to see him walk away. I have always said Jacob Kibodi was one of the most improved players from where he was when I saw him the first day of training camp to where he ended up on that last preseason game. How much tangible growth I saw from a player that looked slow with no vision, didn't know what he was doing, to a player that just had physicality, knew what he was doing, and made the right reads. But I still did not think it was quite enough. He's an undrafted guy. And I think the practice squad in his home state is exactly where he belongs. He'll be able to learn. He'll be able to get some good snaps. And he's back on the practice squad. So I think the way those two players played out, it's exactly the way I thought it.
I agree. Kendre Miller, it's too early to give up on him. I mean, you invested the high pick into him. And before, when the Alvin Kamara contract dispute was going on and Kendre was healthy, the question was, if needed, could Kendre potentially carry the load in the Saints' backfield? And I think it's a little too early to give up on him. I'm interested to see how Kibodi grows and how he can continue to develop, but you can't get rid of Kendre. Second question. Kurt from Luttra asks, is the new Saints punter the first left-footed punter in team history? We're not sure about that, but you did get to sit and talk to him yesterday in the locker room. Is there an advantage to him being a left-footed punter?
He said yes, because he said the returners all came up to him after and said it's just a little difficult because of the rotation of the ball when he kicks it. Add in the fact that he can do the Aussie-style stuff.
Yeah.
So I think there is an advantage. I don't know if he's the first lefty. I know he's not the first lefty kicker. Morton was a left-footed kicker. As for punter, he might be, but, man, I'd have to go back into the archives for that one.
Yeah, we don't know if he's the first, but it is interesting because you don't see many left-footed punters across the league. So it's interesting to see maybe there's a muff punt every now and then because, like you said, the rotation's a little different. Maybe that's a bit of an advantage for the Saints. We'll see how that shapes out as we get into the season.
It'd be interesting. And, look, he won that battle, and, Headley, like I said, was so far ahead, and he just kind of fell off. And Headley's an older player. Headley's over 30.
Yeah, he was a rookie, but
Hayball's a little older too because they did the Australian stuff. They come over a little bit later when they do college ball. So that was an interesting one. And look, don't overlook that because I've said the fine line, winning and losing. Where can you get better? Where can you make up some of that difference? To me, it's field position. And if this guy gives you a better chance of consistent field position on defense, got to do what you got to do. So anyway, I thought that was a good competition, but Hayball was the one they declared the winner. Anything else for us today?
Nope, we good.
All right, Nola Gold. I wonder if he's been
repping the
any. I
squad.
wonder if he's been to any Nola Gold games because Aussie style. Maybe he's got the rugby connection.
He's probably been out there. Nola Gold need a new head coach. We're going to be monitoring that for you because we're all over the Nola Gold.
We'll figure that out. All right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.